Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. Now in today's video we're going to create a Python project which is an invoice generator. So you can think of this project as both a Python GUI project by creating this interface with Tkinter, as well as a Python automation project because we will be automating the creation of different Word documents. So the way this is going to work is that we have this template right here. So this is a template for our invoice. You can see that it has different information that you need to fill in. Of course, I'll walk you through it later on and I'll explain exactly what all these different words mean and what is actually going on here. Now, the way the interface will work is that you will come here, you will fill in the info. So let's say John Smith, and let's say his mobile number is 0, and then let's give it a quantity. Let's say he bought 8 different pens, and then we're going to give it this value. So if you press add item, you can see now that we're still building John's invoice, and you can see these are his items. So the quantity is 8, the total is 4. So let's say he also bought one notebook, and then the notebook itself was maybe $5, and let's add the item. So now you can see we are slowly building his invoice. Now if I press on generate invoice and I get this pop-up saying invoice complete, and I go to my file explorer, you can see that this file was just created. So the file is called new invoice John Smith 2022 10 October 8, and with all the information. So let me open it up. As you can see, you have the exact same template that we had before. So this is the template, but the information has been filled in. So you can see the invoice is to John Smith. This is his phone. And then this is all the stuff that he bought, as well as the total, the tax, and the final total. So you have the subtotal and the final total. Now, of course, the app's still running, by the way. So let's go ahead. And now let's do one for Jane Doe. So let's say I'm a business owner and people are coming in and out of my business all the time. This is a very useful app for me because I can create these invoices all the time in a very quick and easy way. So let's say her phone number is a bunch of 5s, and let's say she bought one bag, and let's give it a price of 20. Let's say she bought one pen as well, and let's say the price is, maybe let's change the quantity. And then let's say one book, and the book is about 12. Let's add the item. Alright, so now we have all of her information. You can see it's being updated inside the table each time. Now if I press on generate invoice, it says invoice complete. And as you can see here, you have a brand new Word file for Jane. And if you open it up, as you can see, all the information is here, all her information, the total, the subtotal, the tax, everything is here. Okay, so we're going to create this step by step using Python, Tkinter, as well as a separate library for automating Microsoft Word with Python. Now, this tutorial is completely beginner friendly. You don't need to know how to use any of the tools except some Python experience, of course. You can be totally new to Tkinter. I will be showing you exactly how to do everything step by step. The only thing I ask of you is to make sure you have it installed. I have a separate video for that, very short, 3-4 minutes. Just go ahead, watch that, install Tkinter, then you can come back here. It will be linked in the description, of course. And yeah, so without further ado, let's get started. Part 1, I will cover how this whole template thing works, how to automate the Word stuff. Part 2, I will cover how to create the interface, and in part 3, we're going to put it all together. The source code, as always, will be in the description, as well as the Word template as well. So in part 1, we're going to focus on how we can take these document templates that we have in Word, use Python to fill in the information, and then generate a new document. So this is for part 1. In part 2 of the video, I will show you how you can create the interface with Tkinter and put everything together. So for now, we want to focus on the type of library that we're using. The library is called doxtpl. This stands for docs template, and this is what will allow us to actually use these templates from Microsoft Word. To install it, simply open up a terminal the way I have here. Again, I'm using VS Code. You can use any text editor that you like, and you can use the regular command prompt. You don't need to use the integrated terminal. I'm just using this for convenience sake. So all I have to do is pip install doxtpl. So this is the name of the library that we're using, and this is what will enable us to use these templates. Of course, in my case, it says requirement already satisfied. This is because I've previously downloaded it, but in your case, just wait a minute and you will have it. Alright, now that we have it downloaded, you can see I have a Python file called docgen.py, and I'm simply importing it. So I'm importing docs template from doxtpl. And inside my folder, you can see I have two files. I have the doxgen.py and I have the invoice template.docs. This thing here, this is only because I have the actual document open, so you're going to see this temporary file. However, if I close it, this will go away. So I only have two different files in my folder. So this invoice template.docs, let's take a look at it. This is how it looks like. So I actually took a simple template from the official Microsoft Word templates that you have. When you open up Word, you have these options, but I modified it extensively just to have this very simple document. This will be included inside the GitHub link, so you can find the template there so you can use it for your own project. Alright, so this is what it looks like. You have the title, invoice, you have to, so who is the person purchasing from you, as well as their phone number. Then a table, and this is where all the information about the different products that this person purchased will be. So I didn't fill anything in the table because it's slightly more complicated, and we'll get to it in just a second. But as you can see, there is a special kind of syntax that I'm putting here, 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 and here. So in 5 different places. Let me actually zoom in so you can see this better. Alright, so you can see that these curly braces around the word name, this special syntax will enable me to use Python and actually write the name of the person here using my Python code. So this is how I do it in an automated way, and I don't have to manually type it in Word myself. So this is what we're going to do. We're going to use this special syntax that we have in our template, access the template from Python, and then put some information here. Now, let me show you a quick demo of how this is going to work. So again, this is the curly braces. You can see here it says name. Now you can write anything here. It's up to you. Think of it, it's very similar to a variable when you program. So here, this is like a variable called name, and we're going to fill in this name value. So let's go back to Python. So how do we do this? We already imported docs template. What I want to do is I want to load my template into Python. I do this using this line of code. So I create a variable called doc, then simply I just create an instance of the docs template class, and what I do is I say the name of my file. So I say invoice underscore template.docs. This is the name of my file. I'm saying load this into my Python code. Once you do that, now you have it, and you're able to render it and make changes to it using your code. So when you're done rendering, you want to save. So I say doc.save. This will be the name of the new file generated. So I just called it new invoice.docs. So I have my old file, and then I'm generating a new file. As I said before, to actually make any changes, you need to render. So this is the line of code you will need. You have to say doc.render. Then you're going to pass some stuff here that we're going to talk about in just a second. So by doing so, you're actually able to create a new file. Let's actually try it out without changing any information in the template. Let's run it. Now that we ran it, it's done. I have a new invoice.docs. You can see it right here inside my folder. If I open up the folder, you can see it was just created right now at 1:11 p.m., which is the exact time in which I'm filming this. So let's actually open it. And when I open it, you can see that the values here are blank. You don't have these weird syntaxy variable names. So here you have name, phone, subtotal, tax, total, things like that. Here, you don't have anything. They're totally blank. This is because when we rendered, we didn't pass any values, so they were null by default, so they are completely blank. So this is our new invoice, and this is what it looks like. Let's close it, and let's now actually try to put a name here. So ideally here we want to put a name, and we want to do so using Python. So if I close it, I'm back in Python. What I want to do is simply I say name, and I just give it John. So this is a Python dictionary, and then inside it what you need to do is you specify the name of the variable that you have here inside your template and the value which you want to give it. So this is key value. So the key here is name, and I want to give it the value John. Now, if I run it again, you can see new invoice. Now, here you can't see it, but here you can see it was modified at 1:12 p.m. So it gets overwritten using my code. And now let's open it up again. And you can see now we have John here. So magically, through the Python code, we were able to take the name John and put it in this specific spot on the document without specifying anything other than the key, which is name. So we said in place of this variable name. So if I go back to the template, in place of this name here, go ahead and put John. And that's exactly what Python did. So this is really cool because now you have John here, and then we can fill in all the other information. So filling in the rest, phone, subtotal, tax, and total, is pretty straightforward. So it's the exact same thing that we just did for John. However, filling in the table is a bit more complicated. So I'm just going to close the new invoice and start showing you how we're going to fill in this table. So here we need to specify a few more things because it's a table and we can't predict how many rows it's going to be. So I can go ahead and say this will be called quantity 1, quantity 2, quantity 3, and then description 1, description 2, description 3, but that's just for 3 lines. However, if I had 100 rows and if someone was just shopping a lot and they bought tons of things, you're going to need a very, very large table with multiple rows, and you will have to fill all of that manually. So obviously we don't want to do that. We want to benefit from the idea of a for loop that we already have in Python. So what we're going to do is I will just add these here and I will explain them to you step by step. So here you have this syntax. So again, we have the curly braces. Now this time you can see %tr and then we're ending with %. Here tr stands for table row. So we're saying these table rows will have 4 item in invoice list. So this is very similar to standard Python syntax. So 4 item in invoice list. Here we're going to have these item objects which will have all the information that we need. And in the final row, I say the %tr and then end 4. So here I'm saying once the for loop is done, just end this whole table row thing. And now here, I'm using the item that I got here to actually get all the information within it. So item sub 0 means get me the first thing in item sub 1 get the second one, item sub 2 third, and item sub 3 fourth. So this might be still confusing. When you see an example, it will be much more clear. But essentially what we're doing is we're looping over this invoice list, getting each specific item and assigning each item to one row, and then ending the for loop here. And then inside each row, we split the item. So we split the different quantity, description, price, total into separate cells. And we do so using this indexing mechanism here. So let me show you an example just to make it a bit more clear. So now before I showed you how we were able to render name as John. Now you can add another render like this as invoice list. So you can see invoice list and it will be assigned to a variable in Python, which is invoice list. Now let's create this variable. First, it's going to be an empty list. We said that this is a Python list, but each row itself is also a list. So it's going to be a list of lists. So as you can see, you have 2 nested lists here. And if you look at it right now, you can see you have 2, pen, and the price is 0.5, so the total is 1. So here I have my invoice list. Currently it has only 1 row, and this row contains this information. So let's verify that this is working, and then we'll compare this list with the one that we added in our template. Let's run. So now that it's done, let's actually open up the new invoice, and I open it. And as you can see, name is John still here. And then here inside the table, we have 1 row because our list itself only had 1 row. And we have the quantity 2, the description pen, the price is 0.5, and then the total is 1, which is exactly what we told it to put. So again, what we did is we started this for loop for this invoice list. So this invoice list. And each for loop, we said 4 item in invoice list. So each item will be equal to one of these. It's going to be a list itself. Now we said item sub 0, which is this one. So here, item sub 0. So the very first item in this list, which is this number 2. So item sub 1 is the pen. And we put all of these in their corresponding cells, which gave us this output. So this is how you're able to actually process this Python list and convert it to this table in Microsoft Word. Now let's go ahead and try it out with multiple different rows. So I'm going to add these. And as you can see, this person bought other items. So they bought 1 of the paper pack, 2 of the notebook, and they have these quantities, prices, and the totals. Now I have hard coded the totals here, although I could do some multiplication. We'll do that when we do the full application with Tkinter. So let's run it. Now that it's done, let's go ahead and then open this again. And as you can see, our table was filled with all the information that we needed. So it's pretty straightforward. Once you understand the basic syntax that comes with creating your template and then importing it using this doxtpl library, it's very simple to render the information and fill everything in like I just showed you. Let's go ahead and just fill in the rest of the information just for the sake of example. So we add the phone, and let's add the subtotal, sales tax, and total. Again, here I'm hard coding it, but when we do the full application, this will be a summation of all the totals. This will be a multiplication with the percentage. So don't worry about that. I'll show you how we do it. But for now, this is just an example. Let's run it again. So we have an error. Oh, permission denied. This is because the new invoice is open. So let me actually close it. And now this should work. So be careful when you actually run it and the file is open, the Python won't be able to write to this file. So now that this is done, let's open it up again. And as you can see, all the information is here, including the totals, the tax, and all the information in the table. So this is how we were able to use Python to automate the creation of the invoice through the code and filling in all the information in this template. So next, what we're going to do in part 2 of this video, we're going to create the interface using Tkinter, and finally we will put everything together to have this invoice generator. Okay, so in part 2, we're going to create the Tkinter interface. So in this section, we're not going to look at the documents, we're not going to look at the template, the invoices, all of that. Simply, we're just going to create the interface. Now, for reference, I have a screenshot right here of what the interface should look like. This is going to be our final result once we're done with this creation. All right, so let me walk you through it step by step and see how we're going to create this interface. So here I have some starter code, nothing too complicated. So first of all, I have some imports. I'm importing Tkinter, and then I'm importing TTK from Tkinter. Now TTK is the themed widgets module for Tkinter. So these are basically widgets that you can style. Some of the widgets are actually different and they come with different features. Some of them only exist in TTK and not in Tkinter. Some of them exist in Tkinter and not in TTK. So you'll see why we need the TTK module later on in the video once I actually use it. But for now, just know that you need to import it and import Tkinter as well. Now here what I have is window is equal to tkinter.tk. Basically here I'm creating my root widget, which is my window itself. So when I create this, here I'm basically creating this part, so the actual window, not the widgets within it, just the window itself. This is the parent or the root window. Now, I also set the title, so I say window.title is equal to invoice generator form. This is my title, and as you can see, this will show up here, so this will be the title of the window. Then finally, I say window.main loop. Now this main loop, basically it's just an infinite loop that will run. It's the event loop for Tkinter. So as long as your Tkinter application is running, this main loop is running and it's receiving events in case you interact with the application or something happens. When you close the app, this main loop terminates and the Python app can terminate. All right, so this is what our starter code looks like. Now, how are we going to start? First things first, we're going to create something called a frame. Now a frame is going to be another container within our larger window container, and it will hold everything else in the application. So here you can see this is the root window. Inside it now, an invisible second container is something here. So I'm just going to draw on the image, but basically there's another square here, and this is, okay, excuse my drawing skills, but this is basically another container within my larger container, which is the window. You don't really see it, it's invisible, but this is going to help me keep the application responsive and look nice as I resize my window. So more on that later, because as I show you and as we build the application, you'll see why we use the frame exactly. But just for now, think of it like this. It's another container within your larger window, which is your root widget. So it's a big container, then within it you have the frame, which is a smaller container, and within it you have other things such as these widgets that you see right here. So the buttons, the labels, the text entries, things like that. All right. So I've created the frame. I use tkinter.frame to create it, and then I pass window as its parent. So for every widget that you create in Tkinter, you have to say who the parent is. By parent, we mean where does this widget exist, within which container. So I'm saying the frame exists within the window. All right, so this is how our hierarchy is looking. Now finally, I say frame.pack. In Tkinter, every time you want to add a widget to your screen, you need to do two things. First, you need to create it using its class. So you can say tkinter.frame or tkinter.button or tkinter.label. So this is up to you. Then finally, you have to position it on your screen using a Tkinter geometry manager or a layout manager. These are called pack, place, and grid. There's 3 different methods. Each of them does a certain specific thing. I have a video talking about them in depth, but for now, for this video, we're going to pack the frame. Now pack, what it does is it positions your widget in the middle of the screen with as much space as it requires, and then as you resize the window, it stays in the middle of the screen. And you'll see what I mean as I show you more, and then you understand why we use frame, why we use pack, and all those things. But most importantly, remember, you need to create your widget, and then you need to pack, place, or grid. We'll also use grid later on in this video, so you'll see that in just a second. So we've created our frame, we have the starter code, we also added the frame. Now if I run the app, this is what it looks like. It's a totally blank app. You can see that it's pretty small. When we run it, it's actually very tiny, almost invisible. This is because we don't have anything. The frame gets resized according to the widgets in it, and since the widgets themselves are nothing, there's no widgets, it's going to be totally zero, totally invisible. All right, we have the frame. What we want to do next is add our labels, buttons, and things like that. So we want to add all of these guys that you see right here inside our frame. I'm going to start by adding this first name here. So this is what we call a label, and I'm going to add it in the code. So the label, I'm going to add it like this. I use tkinter.label, and I'm saving this inside a variable called first name label. So tkinter.label, I say the parent this time is frame. So notice how before the parent of frame was window and the parent of the label is the frame. So you have the big box, which is window, then a smaller box inside it, which is frame, and then a smaller box, a very small box, which is the label. So this is how this hierarchy looks like. And I specify the text. So the text is basically what I'll see when I run my application and what the label will display. Now, if I actually run it, you can see the app is still blank. This is because, again, I haven't positioned the label on my screen. I told you, you need 2 things. Anytime you want to put it on your screen, you need 2 things, 2 steps. Create the widget, and then you have to pack, place, or grid. And in this case, we're using grid. Now, here I'm saying first name label dot grid, row equals 0, and then column equals 0. What the grid means, I'll show you in just a second. But for now, let's run it. And as you can see, we can see the first name. And now if I resize, it stays in the center, which is what makes it responsive and resizable. So this is why we needed to use the frame. The frame actually allows us to keep it here and keep it in the center as we resize it. So this is why we have the frame, and we use pack with it, and this is what pack does. So pack allows us to keep everything in the center, then grid allows us to organize them and place them. So I put the first name here, this is the label, and I did it using this line of code, which you saw right now. So grid, then I said row equals 0, column equals 0. Grids basically, let's go back to the image. So I'm going to just clear my drawing. Grid is exactly what it sounds like. It's a grid, it's a table, a matrix, things like that. So if I just draw this, you can see this is what my grid is going to look like. And then you can see that we have these columns and then different rows. So if I lengthen this, so this is really bad. And so on. So anyways, but you can see that we have an actual grid right here. So this is row 0 and then also column 0. Now on this hand, this would be row 0 because it's still the first row, but it would be column 1. And now this is row 0, but it's column 2. So this is what the grid looks like. It's basically a table, and the indexes start with 0. Usually in programming, most things do. Now here, this is the second column, so it's going to be, the second row, so it's going to be row 1, but still the column is 0 in this case. And then this is 1, 1, and so on. So this is what this whole thing looks like. And this is what we're trying to emulate with our code. So we added the first name label, and we said that this is going to be 0, 0. Done. We already put that. Now for now, we see it in the screen. We don't see a table. So we don't see a table. This is because we don't have anything else. And the way grids work is in Python, and in Tkinter especially, is that, for example, let's say I put row 70, this is still going to be here because each row or each column takes up as much space as the widgets in it. So because the other rows and columns are empty, they will not show up and they will be almost invisible. So they will have no size. So we added the first name label. The next thing we're going to do, we're going to add the last name label. So to do so, same thing, you say tkinter.label. Then what I'm going to do is say the parent is the frame. So of course it belongs to our frame. We already explained the hierarchy and the widgets, how they work. And then I say the text is going to be last name. Now, according to the grid, the one we drew here, last name exists inside row 0 but column 1. And we do exactly that. So we say grid, row equals 0, and then column equals 1. So now if we run it, as you can see, we have two labels, first name and last name. The first name comes first because it's in column 0, and then this one is in column 1. And of course, if I resize it, you can see it's resizable and they're still in the center. This is due to the use of the frame. Now let's close it. So now that we've added these two labels, let's go ahead and actually add the entries for the first name and the last name. So the entries are these guys right here. This is where you would enter text input. So let's go ahead and do this. So you see these 4 lines of code here. I say first name entry is equal to tkinter.entry. So same thing as before, the way we said tkinter.label, we specify the parent is frame, of course, because it belongs to the frame. Then same thing for the last name entry, tkinter.entry frame. And of course, I need to add them to my grid. So I do so. I say row equal 1, column equals 0 for the first name entry. And this is exactly why. So we said here, this is the entry, rows 1, column 0. Then here, this is row 1, column 1. And I specify just that. So I do this using these 2 lines of code. Now let's run it. And as you can see, they are in fact in the right position. Each is under the respective label. So if we resize it, you can see this is row 0, column 0, row 0, column 1, row 1, column 0, and then row 1, column 1, as you can see right here. All right, so we've added these two. Let's go ahead now and add the phone label and entry. So here we're saving the phone number. We have a label for it and we have another entry. So let's go ahead. Now you can see we said tkinter.label, frame, same thing as before. This label exists inside this frame. Then we say the text is equal to phone because this is what we want to display. We add it to the grid using row 0, column 2 because it's the third column, so this column will be 2. Again, you see it right here, so this is 0, 2. And then of course what this one's going to be is row 1 and also column 2 because it's in the same column. So I'm going to do the same thing here. And of course, phone entry is equal to tkinter.entry. It also belongs to the frame. So I'm kind of speeding through these because we're essentially doing the same thing every time. We're creating a label, and then we're creating an entry with this label, and we're organizing them inside this grid. And as you can see now, we have all 3 of them. You have 3 labels, 3 entries, and this is what they look like. If I resize it, they remain in the center because they are inside the frame. So the frame itself is being packed each time and it's placed in the center. All right, so we've created these 3 guys. Now we have another set of 3. So let me just clear this just so that we can actually see. So because here we filled out the first 2 rows, now here you have row 2 and now you have row 3 because we said this is row 0 and this is row 1. So now we have to fill out row 2 and row 3. So I'm going to do the very same thing that I just did before. Now the only difference is here we're not actually using an entry. You'll see what we're using in just a second. So I go ahead, I create the quantity label. Again, tkinter.label, it's inside frame, and this is the text that's supposed to display. Then I put it in the grid, so this is row 2, column 0, just like I told you before. This is now row 2. Now what I want to do next is I want to create this thing right here. This is what we call in Tkinter a spin box. It lets you calculate and lets you change the numbers so you can actually get a numerical output and not just a string. So let's see. So again, I say tkinter.spinbox and it's inside the frame. So this is where it belongs. Then I put it in the grid, row 3, column 0. Let's actually run it and check it out. So as you can see, it gets placed in this column. It doesn't go over and expand to the other columns. So you have the label, the quantity, and then this spin box. So this is supposed to hold a numerical values, let's say 1, and then as you change it, of course this is hypothetical, as you change it, this should increase and decrease while you press these buttons. A spin box in Tkinter is essentially just an entry, just with some buttons. So how are we going to make this work? You actually need to specify a few things when you create your spin box. So here, you have to specify from and to. So in my case, I said from 1 because the minimum you can buy of any item is 1, not 0, obviously. And then I specified 100. However, you can give this any upper bound you like. You can even give it infinity if that's what you want. But in my case, I said from 1 to 100. So if I run it now, you can see the default or the starter value is 1. And if I press on the arrows, I'm able to manipulate the numbers using the arrow buttons. This is really good because now it enables me to actually set my quantity in a numerical way without having to type it out each time. So we added the spin box, we place it in the grid. Now let's do the same for the others. So we have also the description. Now the description is not a spin box, it's in fact just a regular entry, just like the other guys before. So let's go ahead and add that. Pretty straightforward. We have a label. This time the label displays description. Of course, it's inside frame. Then we put it in the grid in row 2 and column 1. Then I do the same thing with entry, so tkinter.entry frame, and then I put it in row 3, column 1. Now I am speeding through these. This is because majority of this code is pretty similar. We're always doing the same 2 steps, defining the label, then putting it in the grid, or defining the entry and putting it in the grid. Now if you want to test yourself and see if you're learning this as you go along, you can pause this video and try to add the final one, which is this label and the spin box. So we already added a spin box before. Just try it out, try to see if you can add this, write the code from memory, see if you're actually learning it and you're retaining it as we go. So that was just a little test. Now we can continue and do the same thing here. So let's see. You have price label, and then again, same thing, we added the label, and then here we added a spin box again. Now in this case, I'm actually going to use increments of 0.5. So let me show you how this will look like before I explain the code. So you can see right here, the price itself is not just 0, it's 0.0. So if I increase now, it increases with increments of 0.5. So 3.5, 4, 4.5, 5, 5.5. This is because of this guy right here. So I said the starter value is 0.0, then it will go up to 500, sorry, and then the increment is 0.5. So this is how you tell the spin box not to increase by 1 each time, but to in fact increase by a certain value. So we've created all of these guys, the first 4 rows in the application. One thing I want to fix, you see here how there is this sort of space at the edge of the application, making it look like it has more breathing room. Like if I run it here, let's just compare. You see everything is kind of squished and it's pretty tight, and you can see there's very little borders or space here around the stuff. So just to fix this quickly, in the pack of the frame, so because we said frame.pack, I just give it a little padding. So I say padding X is 20 and padding Y is 10. So by doing so, let me show you what difference it makes. You can see now there is this little space here around the application, around all the stuff. This is because of the padding. So I said padding 20 on the X, so horizontally there will be like 20 here and 20 here, and then padding 10 on Y, so here and here. This gives the application a bit more breathing room, and as you can see, it looks better because the app doesn't end just outside the boundaries of the widgets. So this is just a stylistic decision. You don't have to do it if you don't want to, but it helps and it makes the application look better. All right. So now we've added all of these and we fixed the padding. Let's go ahead and add this button right here. So we have this small button, which is the add item button. So let's do it. Very simple, straightforward, same process as before. We say tkinter.button, we put it inside the frame, and then we say the text is equal to add item. Now I save this inside a variable called add item button. Then this add item button I say .grid, and I'm going to put it in row number 4, column number 2, with padding 5, just so that it has some padding around it. So why row 4? Because this is the 4th row. We already have 0, 1, 2, 3. This is row number 4. And I specifically chose column number 2. So this is column number 2. We have column 0, column 1, column 2. And I put it here in column number 2. Now you can put it in any of them. I just chose to for aesthetic reasons, but this is totally up to you. So now let's run it and see if it works. As you can see, the button is here. Now, of course, if I click it, nothing happens because we haven't programmed it to do anything. So that's totally fine. Let's just close it. All right. So the next thing we're going to add is a bit different. Now this one doesn't really fit within the grid. We'll figure out how we're going to place it in just a second. But essentially what this is a way for us to display tabular data, or data in the form of a table using Tkinter. This is something called a tree view. I'll show you how we're going to use it and create it in just a second. But I just wanted you to note that this is a bit different from all the other widgets that we created, and it's going to take up much more space in the application. This is where we're going to list all the items that we create in our invoice. So let's see how we're going to do it. As I told you, it's called a tree view. To actually use it, you need this TTK module. You don't use the Tkinter, you use TTK. So this is why we imported it, just so that we can use the tree view. Tree view doesn't exist within the original Tkinter module. Now to create it, I say ttk.treeview. Then I put it inside the frame. So this is the same as before. I'm saying put this inside the parent frame. Columns, headings, I'll explain all of that in just a second. So columns, you have to specifically give it a set of columns. So the columns here in this case will be these 4. You can see we have 4 columns: quantity, description, price, and total. So I put these inside this Python tuple. You can see it right here. So it's called columns, and basically I'm saying the columns property of this tree view is going to be the columns here. All right, let's run it. Of course, it's not here yet because we haven't added it using pack, place, or grid. Let's use grid. And as you can see, I have row equal 5, column equal 0, column span, and some padding. So I'll explain everything, but let's first take a look at it. As you can see, this is the tree view. So this is the table. We have 4 columns. Now they don't have names yet. We'll do that in just a second. But this is how it looks like. And it's taking up space over 3 columns. This is because I specified this column span 3. Now if I clear it and I run it again, you can see it tries to put this whole thing inside the first column, and it severely distorts the application. So you can see this is now column 0, this is column 1, and this is column 2, and it looks very wrong. So this column span property, what it did is it's basically telling it is that, okay, start at column 0, but then take up space inside 3 different columns. So span 3 different columns. And this is why it looks much better. So now it's inside 3 different columns and it looks good. So you have column 0, column 1, and column 2. And this is taking up space inside all 3. And now it looks much more presentable. Also, I specified some padding. This is just for stylistic reasons. Again, just to make things space out a little. So you can remove it if you want. So if I remove it like this, and you run it, it's the same thing. It's just a bit more tight here, like it's close to the edges and it's close to this button. You can remove or keep it, it's totally up to you, but I'm going to choose to keep it. All right, so I added the tree. Now I want to add the headings. So I want to add the titles of the columns. So because you see here, it says a quantity, description, price, and total. So let's do that. To do that, it's pretty simple. So you say tree.heading, and then you say the column name, so this name right here, because we already gave it a list of columns. So for the column quantity, give it the text quantity. So this is how we specify the heading. And I'm going to go ahead and do that for all 4 of them. So for the column description, so this one, desk, give it the text description. For the column price, give it text unit price. For column total, give it the text total. So this is how we set the headings. Now let's run it. As you can see, the headings are now here. It looks way better. Of course, we don't have any info yet. We'll get to that soon enough. But for now, this is what it looks like. All right, so we've added the tree view. Now, the last thing I want to add is these two buttons right here, and we're actually almost done with the interface. So these two buttons, they also span 3 different columns. You can see they take up the whole space, and we're going to add them. So let's see. Let's add them using the grid. So we go ahead and do this. So we have the save invoice button. It's a Tkinter button. It exists inside the frame, and the text is going to be generate invoice. So this is the first one. Now the second one, it's going to be called new invoice. So you can see here, and it says text new invoice. Now when I add them to this grid, here's how I'm going to do it. So you have row 6, column 0. This makes sense because before we said this is row 4, and now of course this is row 5, and then this makes sense that this is row 6 and this is row 7. We put it inside column 0 in both cases, and then the column span is going to be equal to 3. Again, the reason is because by doing so, we're saying take up space in 3 columns. Now, why do I say sticky equal news? This is very weird. I'm going to explain this by showing you what happens when I remove this line and I run it. So as you can see, the generate invoice button is now very tight and small, and it's not as big as the new invoice. So the new invoice takes up the whole space just like the tree view before it. So this sticky equal news is basically telling it where should I expand. The sticky attribute decides where I expand. Now, why news? This stands for north, east, west, and south. So by doing so, I'm saying expand in these areas. If I just keep it as E, so here I'm saying east, you can see it just moves to the east. So this is why it looks weird, it looks different. So when we say news, this means that do it in the north, east, west, and south. So this is what it means. And as you can see, now it takes up the whole space. I do the same thing for the other button. Now I'm not going to show you because it's the exact same thing. And I also added some padding for stylistic reasons. So now we have officially created the interface. So we built it using the code, we built it using Tkinter. It looks nice, it looks the exact same as this one. So now we have the interface that we wanted. Now what do we want to do next? We want to add some functionality to these buttons. First things first, I want this add item when I fill in some info. So let's say quantity 4 and then description pen and then the price is 0 or is 1. I press add item. What I ideally want is I want the item to show up here in this table, indicating that my invoice now has an additional item. It has a new item on the invoice. So let's do that using the code. First things first, anytime you want to link a button to a specific line of code, you're going to use this command property. So inside my add item button, where I specify tkinter.button, frame, the text, everything, I also specify command. And in this case, command is going to be equal to add item. Now add item should be a function that I write myself that should get executed when this button is pressed. So basically, when add item button is pressed, go ahead and execute add item function. Now where is the add item function? Let's go and create it. So here at the top of my code, I create a new function called add item. So as you can see, it's called add item, and this is what's going to be executed when this command happens. So when this button is clicked. So I'll show you what I mean in just a second. Let's try to actually print hi. Okay, so I'm just going to print something just to show you that this function is getting executed. So if I run it and I press on add item, you can see hi gets printed here. Let's do it again and again and again. So if I scroll up, you can see hi is being printed each time. So what's happening in the code is that when the button's getting clicked, this command guy is telling us go to add item and execute this. This is basically how it's working. All right, so I don't want this. What I want to do is to actually get the information from my different here. So from these different entries. So I want to get the quantity, get the description, and get the price. So let's do that. First things first, I save in a variable called quantity the quantity spinbox dot get. So this function dot get will get me the value of the spinbox, which is in this case 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 or whatever. And I convert it to an integer because I want it as an int. I don't want it as a string. It genuinely just returns a string at first. All right. Now, I do the same thing with the description. So I say description entry dot get, and in this case, this is just a string. So here I'm getting the value of the description. Finally, I get the price. Now this one I convert to a float because it can have the value of 0.5 and different increments. So I say float price spinbox dot get, as you can see here. All right, now I want to extract the total price. So to do so, I just have to multiply the quantity by the price. So this is just a case of multiplication. So if one pen costs $1 and the person bought 2 pens, this is going to be a total of $2. So now I extracted all this info. What I want to do is I will save them inside a list. So this is my list and it's going to be called invoice item. And then this invoice item will have all this information inside of it. What I want to do next is I want to simply add this to the tree view, to the table where I was saving all my information. So I want to add this to this table right here. To do so, one line of code, you say tree.insert, and then you say this, so you don't have an identifier for it. This is just for the sake of the identifier. 0, and then you say values invoice item. So here you're saying this is added at the start of the row. So let's see if I run it. And now you can see here, let's put a quantity of 4, let's say pen, and then each pen costs 50 cents. Let's press on add item. You can see the information was added here. Now let's actually change this. Let's go with 8. And maybe here we're going to say 8 paper. And then also let's go with 1. These are just hypothetical, but as you can see, the information is being saved here and it's being added to the table. So this is really cool. Now we have this functioning and we're able to add our different items to our tree view. Now, what is one problem that we have here? We ideally want these values to be cleared each time we finish adding an item. So ideally, I don't want to have to erase this and write something new. I want it to get cleared on its own. So let me show you how we're going to do that through the code. At the end of our add item, after we've inserted everything into our tree, we're going to actually go ahead and clear item. So here I'm adding this function and I'm going to explain it to you just step by step, just a second. We're adding this function just so that we can clear the items in the tree view. And then of course, inside add item, I have to call it. So I say clear item. Let me show you how it works in action and then I'll explain the code. So if I run it, let's say quantity 5, pen, and then 0.5. And if I press on add item, you can see it was added here. And also these guys returned to their default values and this one was cleared as well. This is really helpful because it doesn't mean I have to keep erasing and keep modifying, and it reduces the likelihood of errors. So now if I go here and I press on paper and give it some random price and I press add item, you can see again it gets cleared. Okay, perfect. Now that we have this, let me just explain how the code is working. Basically for the quantity spin box, I say .delete from 0 till end. 0 means delete from the start of the spin box to the very end. Tkinter.end means the very end of the spin box. Then I inserted into the spin box the default value, which in this case is 1. Now, on the other hand, the description entry, I delete 0 and then I also delete to the Tkinter end. Then same thing. So here I cleared the description entry. Here I do the same thing for the spin box. I delete from 0 till Tkinter end and I insert the value 0.0. So let me run it and just change the values here. Add item. And as you can see, it gets cleared. So this is what I already showed you. All right. So now we have the clear item and we have the add item working. The next thing that we want to actually work is this new invoice guy right here. So new invoice does something pretty similar, except this time we want to clear everything. So we want to clear the first name, the last name, the phone, things like that. So before I wasn't really showing you the first name and last name, but basically let's say I'm putting in for John Smith and then he gives me his phone number, which is a bunch of zeros. And then this is where I'm changing the quantity. So pen, and then this is going to be 2.5. Okay, so when I added item, it cleared these guys, but this one stayed the same. This is because we're working within one single invoice. So this invoice is still for John Smith. Now, if he goes ahead and buys a notebook, and then this is priced in some certain way, we add the item, these are all still for John Smith. When we want to export the Word document which has the invoice, this is going to be for John Smith as well. So we're not clearing his first name, last name, and phone. However, let's say I don't want to do his invoice anymore. I want a new invoice. So this is what the new invoice button should do. It should clear everything. It should clear his name, his phone, and it should also clear his 2 items. It should clear everything he's done so far, and we start fresh from a blank slate. So let's code that. Now, again, you need to actually specify the command. So for the new invoice button, every time it's clicked, go ahead and execute the new invoice function. So this function, we're going to define it here. Now, what it's going to look like is as follows. We have the first name entry .delete from 0 till end, last name entry same thing, and phone entry same thing. So we're clearing these 3 different entries from 0 till end. So we're clearing the whole thing. Now, another thing we want to do is we want to clear item. This is because the clear item here, it already clears the other 3. So it clears these guys. We don't want to copy paste the same code. We just call it again, and this way we cleared up everything. Now let's try it out. Let's see if it works. So again, I'm going to say John Smith, and then the phone is going to be a bunch of zeros, and this is going to be 6 different pens, and it's going to be 1.5. So as you can see, this was added here. And let's say he got a notebook as well, and it was a certain number. Let's add it. Okay. So now if I press on new invoice, you can see everything here was cleared except the tree view. So this is the very last step that we're going to do here. We have to clear everything inside the tree view. This is one line of code. Very straightforward. So back in new invoice, we say tree.delete. And then we use this operator. Basically, we're saying delete each one inside the get children, delete each child inside get children, and this should delete everything. So let's run it and go with John Doe and then his phone, then a bunch of information here. So I'm doing the same examples, but anyway, so notebook, this is going to be, let's say 6. So now if I press on new invoice, everything was cleared. All his information as well as all the items we had previously logged into the tree. So this is the end of part 2. So part 2, what we did is we created the interface from scratch using Tkinter. We programmed these 2 buttons, the add item and the new invoice button. Now, in the final part, we will program the generate invoice. What this will do is it will produce the Word document just as I showed you at the start of the video. It will produce it and generate it from the template that we have. So now we've come to the final part. We want to link everything together. We want to use the UI. We want to press on this generate invoice button and actually get outputted with a Word document that fills in the template using the information that we entered here. So how can we do this? So first things first, we're going to import 2 things. We're going to import this docs template, which we used before in this short demo. So I'm not going to use any of this code. I'm just going to put the relevant code in the new file, but I will be using it for reference. Alright, so we will import the docs template, and another thing, we will import datetime. I'll show you why in just a few minutes while we're using it in the code. So now that we've imported them, the first thing we want to do is we want to add a command to the generate invoice button. So similar to what we did before using the new invoice and add item, you can see here command equal generate invoice. And of course we have to create a function for it, so we go ahead and do that here. So we say def generate invoice. So now that we have this function, we want to fill it in. We want to get the information from the interface and save it in different variables. First thing, let's create the template. So this is going to be the template that we're loading. Of course, it's the very same one, the invoice template.docs. So you can see this is the one that we have. Nothing changed, the same template that we did in the demo at the very start of the video. All right. Next, we want to get the name from the interface. To do so, it's pretty simple. So we say first name entry.get. So we get the first name, then we concatenate it with the last name. So we say last name entry.get as well. And we save both of these inside a variable called name. Of course, this variable called name will later be filled in here and it will take up this spot. So if I enter the name, first name John, last name Smith, John Smith should be outputted here when we generate the invoice. Now, we got the name, we can get the phone in the exact same way. So I use the phone entry to get the phone. All right, now that we've done this, I'm going to show you how we're going to render. So remember in the first demo that I showed you this, we had the template, we loaded it, then we rendered it, we did doc.render, so we rendered the changes, we put in and filled in all the different variables, and then we saved, so we said doc.save. So now I'm showing you how you can render. So of course the name is going to be the name variable that we saved, then phone is going to be the phone variable that we saved. And the rest of them, I'll show you how we're going to add them step by step. So we need an invoice list. So when we were adding these different invoices, every time we pressed add item, we were adding them to the table, but we weren't really saving them anywhere. So to do so, I'm going to create a list called invoice list, which is going to keep storing all my invoices every time I add them. And not all invoices, I mean all the items. So be careful here. So it's going to be all the items. So every time I add an item for one specific customer, they will all be saved inside this invoice list. So how do we do that? So going back to our add item function, I'm going to create a variable called invoice list. So this invoice list will keep track of all the items this specific customer added. So every time I say add item, I'm going to append the invoice item. So we said the invoice item contains all the information, quantity, description, price, the total. So this list, we will add it inside this bigger list, which is invoice list. So the output should look something like this one right here. So we already created it, we hard-coded all these values. Now we're saving and creating this type of list using the Python code. So we're not doing it manually like you see right here. So after appending to it, of course, when we press new invoice, this list should get cleared. So here I add a invoice list.clear. So you can see it right here. All right, so now I was able to save all my items in the list and then clear it every time I have a new invoice. So now I actually have an invoice list right here. So this variable is taken care of. This should fill in the table with all the different items. Now the rest of them, so subtotal, sales tax, total, how do I get those? So with subtotal, here you can see that we have this function right here. So we're using the sum function built in with Python, and we're summing item sub 3 for item in invoice list. Now sub 3 means we're getting the fourth element. Now here you can see each item looks like this: quantity, description, price, and line total. So I'm summing all the line totals together to achieve my final subtotal. Of course, we have the sales tax. Now the sales tax, you set it to whatever you like. So in my case, I'm setting it to be 10%. In your case, you can set it to whatever you want. And then you can calculate the total by multiplying the subtotal by 1 minus the sales tax. So if the tax is 10%, this is going to multiply it by 90%, and you will get 90% of the subtotal as your final total. Now the final step, we said before, you need to load the template, render the changes, and then finally save. So before we were saving in one file called newinvoice.docs. Now there's a problem with this, because if I save every invoice to newinvoice.docs, this information will keep getting overwritten. That means if I get 10 customers, all 10 of their invoices will go in the same place and I will lose this information. So essentially losing the invoices. So how can I fix that? To do so, we're going to create some unique document names. This means that if John Smith walks in and I create an invoice for him, it should be different from the invoice generated if Jane Doe walks in and I create an invoice for her. So how do I do that? If I add these two lines of code, so as you can see, you have the doc name. This is the variable. This will contain the doc name. And finally, I will say doc.save doc name. So before we said doc.save new invoice, now we're just creating this doc name. How does this doc name look like? It's going to contain the term new invoice concatenated with the name of the person, so their actual name, and then the date, time, the actual timestamp that we're getting from the very moment that we create the invoice. So this means that, let's say John Smith comes in right now and I generate an invoice for him. What this should say is new invoice, John Smith, October 8, 2022 at 8:24 p.m. and the seconds as well, .docs. So by doing so, we generate a long doc name, but this doc name is going to always be unique because it's unique to the customer and unique to the date and time. And if you're a bit confused by this, don't worry, because I'll show you a quick demo in just a second. But this is essentially what we need. This is what we need to create this invoice. So let's try it out. Let's see the result. So let's run it. So as you can see here, let's say John Smith, and then let's give him a phone number of 000 and then a bunch of zeros. So for me, this doesn't really matter. We're just doing this for example. So let's say he got 6 pens and each pen costs 50 cents. So let's add this to our total. He also bought one notebook, and the notebook in this case, let's say it costs $7. So you can see we have his chart, you have his table with all his information and all the things that he just purchased. So now if I press on generate invoice, you can see here a new document was just created. Now let me go to my file explorer. It says new invoice, John Smith, 2022, 10/08, 20. This is the random seconds. So this is the time. So now if I open it, as you can see, all the information was filled in. So you have invoice to John Smith with this phone number. Now you can see that the items that he purchased are all here. The subtotal is here. The tax is 10%, so the total is 9. And all the information was filled out, and it created this unique file for him. One thing I want to comment on is this. So you see that his information is still here. Ideally, what I want his information to be erased every time I generate his invoice, because now we're creating a new invoice. So this is pretty simple. I'm just going to call the new invoice function. This means that his info will be cleared every time I generate the invoice. So let's see. If I go ahead and say John Smith and then put his phone number, and this could be the same John Smith or another one. It doesn't matter because the name of the document will be unique. So watch this. Let's say this is the price and let's generate the invoice. Now everything got cleared. Because we called the new invoice function, everything got cleared. So now we're starting from scratch. Now going back here, you can see there's a new document with the name John Smith, but of course it's a different document because the timing is different. Now opening it, you can see we have all our information in the right place. And we were able to clear it from the app once we were done. So this gives us a blank slate to work with so that we start again and start creating a new invoice. Now the very last thing I want to show you is let's create a pop-up that tells us that this document is done generating. Now to do so, we're going to use something called the Tkinter message box. So going back to your imports, you want to import this line of code. So from Tkinter, import message box, and then it's a very simple one line of code. Inside our function, you will say messagebox.showInfo invoice complete, and then I'm just going to give it invoice complete. So I'll show you what these guys mean when I run it. So let's go ahead. Let's say Jane Doe, and then let's give her a phone number, which is 00, and let's give the stuff. Let's say she bought pencils and pencils. And they cost 50 cents, and then she bought 6 books, and the books all cost 20. So I'm just going to say 20, add the items, and then let's generate an invoice where you see this pop up. It says invoice complete and invoice complete. So the first one that we passed was the title of the window, and the second one was the text that should be displayed here. So as you can see, this pop-up enabled us to know when the document was generated. So it's just a nice touch to add. You don't need to add it at the end of the application, but you can. All right, so we can verify. Let's see. So you have Jane Doe here, open the document, and all her information is here.